Welcome to the White Sox Recap Podcast here on the Recap Network and wherever you subscribe to podcasts. I'm Ryan McGuffey. The White Sox have found their next manager. Scott Merkin of MLB.com dropped a Merk bomb during Game 4 of the World Series that Will Venable will be named the next manager on the South Side. The resume is lengthy and impressive, working with names like Theo Epstein, Joe Maddon, Bruce Bochy. The pedigree is there. So what does it mean for the Sox moving forward, the coaching staff, the roster? Brian Anderson joins me to discuss all of these questions and gives a personal history with Will Venable as the pair used to work out together and get swole in the off seasons. It's the White Sox Recap Podcast, and it starts right now. All right, BA, in the flesh, first off. Yeah, where's the draft?
Well,
the
draft's still back in Omaha. Couldn't make it. It didn't fit my truck. It's 12 feet tall.
Well, it was quite the talk of the first podcast that we did together. And you know, a week later, here we are. We talked about on the first podcast, you know, who the manager, what the list looked like, who it might be. Your finalist included Will Venable. And here we find out during Game 4 of the World Series that while not yet official, that we're just waiting for the White Sox to make it official, whether it's on an off day or after the World Series goes final, that Will Venable will, in fact, be the next manager of the Chicago White Sox. Your initial impression?
Yeah, it just made so much sense to me, right? He checks all the boxes. I know you're going to get some pushback, or, you know, you may have some concerns. The media, the fans may have some concerns about, oh, he's never managed before. But like we had spoke before the show, how are you supposed to get manager experience until you've managed, right? So, I
mean, Ozzie Guillen, right? Yeah. Never had managed until all of a sudden you got the opportunity. I think, look, there always should be concern with the White Sox when you talk about like this role, at least as of late. However, the last 12 to 24 hours, for the first time in a long time, certainly the last two seasons, if you look up and down social media, and I'm talking about people who played the game, people who've covered the game for a long time, teammates, former teammates, anybody that had a trace to Will Venable, everyone's saying the same thing. The White Sox got this one right. So maybe for the first time in a while, it should be applauded that Chris Getz had his process, went through it his way, kept quiet, very few leaks during the process. We talked about this on Inside the Clubhouse last week, that there has been no noise coming from 35th and Shields. And there was noise in the past coming from 35th and Shields. I think this was handled the perfect way.
Yeah, I mean, look at the body of work, right? I think that sometimes we fail as fans and as media of like looking back and saying like, what has this guy been up to? And I remember working out with Will and that like awesome group we had back in the day. And
which included who?
Yeah, I mean, it was nuts. I mean, down at Fitness Quest 10 with Todd Durkin and that staff was incredible. But the camaraderie we had Nick Hunley, Mark Pryor, Chris Young, the GM, Will Venable, amongst many others. There's a ton of guys that would come in and out of there outside of football. So again, like you got to look at this guy's body of work, and you look at who he's attached himself to over the last few years, maybe half a decade, right? You look at most recently with Bruce Bochy, right?
Yeah,
winner. I mean, who's been a better manager than that guy over the last 15 years?
Hall of Famer.
Yeah, right.
Will be Hall of Famer.
And then his time with Alex Cora, championship in 18, right?
Yep.
Or that core group or that franchise is a winner. And then also, attaching himself to Theo Epstein, right?
Hall of Famer, maybe the best team builder of all time, Joe Maddon.
Yeah.
I mean, Theo Epstein's first Will Venable, he went from player to front office. And the first person that called him and hired him was Theo Epstein.
Yeah.
So think about that. I mean, you're transitioning from the field, which was an 8.5, 9-year career, most of which was in San Diego. And Theo Epstein is calling you to come to the Cubs as part of this rebirth and rebuild of that situation. And then you get to learn on the field from those are Hall of Fame names we just talked about. I mean, Joe Maddon's going to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Bruce Bochy is already solidified himself as a Hall of Famer. He's won 4 damn World Series. There's a couple of things that are interesting. Like Venable last year was a hot candidate for jobs in Cleveland, for jobs in New York. Both of which, ironically, both the Mets and the Guardians go to their respective championship series. And he's taking now the team with the worst record in the history of the game. I think all of that stuff just needs to be tabled because Will Venable, in my opinion, is not here as a bridge guy. Do you agree? Like, he's not the get me over fastball until they're ready to win.
Absolutely. So he, in my opinion, this is a long-term play for everybody. You coming into a no pressure situation, not that the fans aren't going to be tough. Chicago media can be tough, but you're looking at an opportunity here where it didn't get any worse, right? The White Sox will never be worse than they were last year. That I truly believe that. But you look at a guy with his past, his credentials, and the culture building opportunity they have. It is my belief that in spring training, or even right now, he's going to set the standard. And they've done a tremendous job these last couple of years under Chris Young and Nick Hundley doing the director of culture stuff over with the Texas Rangers. He's done an incredible job of getting things right over there. Right? I know they didn't have a great year this year, but dealing with injuries, everyone it has that happen to their organization sometimes. But man, he could not be in a better situation. I think the slate will be clean. He'll set the standard early in spring training and get those guys all pulling in the same direction.
All right. So Chris Getz has had a lot of criticism, and I think rightfully so. Some warranted, some maybe not. He was handed kind of a shit hand, right? Like, I mean, like, let's be frank. When he got that job, no one's going to turn that job down, but the roster, he did quote unquote build the roster of the 41 and 121 White Sox. They knew they were losing 100 games. Chris said 105, 110. I'm surprised we lost 121. However, the relationships he has in the game, the people that he's tabbing and bringing along into the organization from outside the Kansas City Royals, which everyone, he's Will Venable's doesn't have a pass with the Royals. But I mean, if you look at their front office right now, Venable's relationship with Chris Getz is a big part of the reason that he's here. This, to me, says a lot about how people in the game feel about Chris Getz, that they know that he's smart. They know that he's impressive, and he's clearly laid a blueprint or created a blueprint to say, here's my plan. Whether it comes to fruition or not, we'll see. But the smarter people I can have in the room around me, you're going to take this thing through. And that's what I think happened here.
Look at the people he's brought in the last 24 months. You got Brian Bannister, accomplished pitcher, pedigree out the wazoo with his dad, and that's just a baseball family. It's incredible. So
Josh Barfield.
Yep, Barfield from Arizona.
Venable. Also, like, all of these guys have dads in the game.
Yes.
Venable, dad in the game.
Yes. And also, like, look at where these guys have been, all winners, right? And you look at like Josh Barfield coming over here, the era in which all these coaches are former players, right? We all kind of played during the same time. And again, we talk about that generational shift in current players, former players. Well, this is a generational shift in the coaching and administration department. It's all guys that played in the similar era. And naturally, right, in life, right? You and I have been friends for 2 decades. Like, we ended up wanting to come do something together. And now's the time for that. But those guys, right, like, they all played against each other. There's a gradual weaning out process of guys you want to work with and who you don't. And Chris Getz is in a power position to hire and fire who he wants. Why not work with people you want to be around?
And we talked about this last week, but former player background in current with this generation. I mean, you can look on the back of Venable's baseball card, and it was less than 10 years ago he was playing the game. Yeah. How much does that matter to this? Because you've been coaching, for those who don't know, you've been coaching in big time Power 5 college conferences. And these kids at 20 and 21 years old, what they're looking for if they're lucky enough and fortunate enough to be drafted in Major League Baseball. So being in an organization with a staff of former players, and I'm talking about recent former players, what does that mean to those guys?
Yeah, I mean, speaking on the college level briefly, you want those kids to want to be like you, have your career, right? And then protect them from the things that don't work or the stupid, idiotic mistakes you made as a player, right? The stupid shit you do off the field that you don't want them to follow your footsteps in that regard. But as far as like the big league's concerned, like, there's some credibility there. And not every great big league manager had a great big league career, right? That's false. But when you're looking to make an organizational change and really shift and get that thing right, you want someone that can say, hey, dude, I was doing this shit, 10 years ago. I know what it's like to go 0 for 20. Hey, man, I got you. I'm not going to let you fail. And I think that's one thing like that had Will had instilled in him, like from the Theo Epstein mindset. It was like Dustin Pedroia struggled his first year and they pulled him in. I know Terry Francona, Theo, I think, pulled him in and said, hey, you better figure it out, dude. We don't have another second baseman. You're our guy. figure it out. We got you. We're going to support you. So I think that's the mentality that Will's going to have. Articulate, polished. He has the credibility with the Princeton background for all the nerds out there that think that has to do with anything with baseball, but he's checking every box. And so for the White Sox fans out there, I won't name names right now, White Sox Dave, but for those White Sox fans out there that are a little pessimistic about the vision, I'll say give it another year, right? And then if they do crappy next year, I'll say give it another year.
Yeah, I mean, they're asking people to wait that have been waiting. Okay. I mean, the vision, I think, is a separate podcast because we're going to know a lot more about that here in the coming weeks. The GM meetings are next week as we tape this, which is another reason you had to have your manager in place. But when you look at Venable, one huge critique and criticism I've had of pretty much most of the staff since Ozzie Guillen has been what's going on here. When I'm having to Google half of the staff, I feel like I know a lot of the names, even the fringe names that came up and through the game. When I'm doing that, when I'm Googling Pedro Grifol's coaching staff and Robin Ventura's coaching staff, and maybe to a lesser extent, not necessarily Tony La Russa, but I think this staff's going to look different. I think this staff's going to have names on it that make more sense. Grady Sizemore is an interesting name I want to bring up too, because he was a finalist in this puppy all the way down to the wire. What does a Will Venable coaching staff look like to you, and what does it need to look like?
Yeah, I think a guy like Will leans on former coaching staff. He might reach out to Boch and say, hey, like I have these couple guys in mind. What do you think? And maybe there's an opportunity to poach a couple guys over from Texas, right? Maybe Chris Young saying like, hey, I get it. There's always a gradual process of where coaches want to ascend to the top. So maybe there's a guy in the minor leagues that Will really likes as far as player development, culture, just brings a certain energy he may want around that organization. But again, like if I'm Will Venable, I'm taking a hard look with Chris Getz, like, hey, who do we have that we can promote within that will give this team some credibility and help build this thing the right way? And also, who can we bring in from the outside that has a tradition of winning and brings, again, a certain energy that is going to get these guys pulling in the same direction? I know we'll harp on that a lot, but last year's team was terrible, right? It was.
But the culture, and no one wants to hear this shit because they always I bring it up and the people are like, oh, who cares about a clubhouse if the team sucks? The culture did change last year. And maybe Pedro has I do think that was more from the front office than it was the manager trying to play fast and all this crap before the season start. They were bringing in 1-year stopgap guys, Paul DeYoung, Nicky Lopez types, veterans who had been in the game for a while and weren't going to take the BS of not hustling, etc. Even though there were a few guys, you might have seen me talk about some of them. But it did clean up some of the room despite what was happening on the field. So I do think I think Venable will now take that baton and instill what he wants. But I'm curious, you talked about the holdovers or guys to promote from within. Do you think Grady Sizemore's on this? Like, he has a contract. Yeah. He's contracted through the 2025 season.
Yeah, I need to take a page out of that book because I've seen these multi-year deals.
I hired you as a $15 an hour intern, so maybe this leads to.
I'm on a servitude contract here. I think these multi-year deals are great, but I was always as a player on a year-to-year basis, right? Like via circa 1955, right, where you had to play well before they locked you up for 2 years, right? But yeah, if I'm Will, if this is my team, I would be foolish, in my opinion, not to keep Grady around. There's players, he has that credibility. In my opinion,
I agree with you.
Future Hall of Famer. He would have been a future Hall of Famer had he not gotten hurt. He was an incredible player.
I told him this recently, a couple of weeks ago. In 2005, down the stretch, when they were charging hard, and I mean they were playing at a clip that was as equal to you guys in the first half. The White Sox were just playing 500 ball in the second half. There was no player that scared me more in the second half of 2005 than Grady Sizemore.
It was insane. He was on base all the time. He was making great plays. You had to listen to all his 300 girlfriends in left center field at Progressive Field.
Is that why he dropped the ball? He dropped the ball in Kansas City that kind of opened the flood.
That's right.
He said, I mentioned that to him, and he said, Jerry thanks me every day, which is why I think I'm here in this seat.
Yeah. No, but again, like I think Will Venable has to take a hard look at keeping someone like him around. I don't know their relationship, but if I'm him, I'm sticking him as one of the bench coaches just to, again, solidify that staff and to appease the media, right? We have all these people in the media like,
I'm sick. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, me. I'm
Yeah.
sitting here going, I want to hear more about your staff, but I do.
Yeah.
I think that's part of. I don't want to see some kind of like somebody else's failed project.
Yeah.
Like
No,
failed
I hear
hitting.
you.
I want the up and coming names that are going to be Will Venable. Like I want Will Venable now to hire the next Will Venable. So I have a name for you because one of his closest friends in the game is Dodgers manager Dave Roberts.
Right.
Clayton McCullough's name was like a favorite for a long time.
Sure.
A lot of people assumed that he was going to get the job. We brought him up last week. Is that a guy? Maybe that's a guy. Maybe Clayton McCullough is pulled out of the first base coaching box after winning the World Series, which is going to happen.
Sure.
And he's brought here in a larger role as part of Will Venable's staff.
If my wife and I are in LA with a young daughter, we have a great setup in Los Angeles and we just win the World Series, there's absolutely no shot she's letting us move back to Chicago. And I'm not taking into account that she's from here, right? But yeah, I mean, every coach is looking to ascend in some way, shape, or form. But if you have a great setup, if I'm coaching with Dave Roberts, I'm being compensated fairly. There's absolutely no way I'm leaving. But why not, right? If you don't ask, you don't get. That's one of the greater terms in business and in real life, right? So he's going to ask. And again, I would be foolish to think he doesn't already have a short list.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that came up in the meetings of what the staff is and going to be and who the people he's already probably talked about. It's not the first time Will Venable's name has been on a managerial list. And when you're going into these interviews, these very long, arduous, like long ass day interviews, you're going to walk in with, here's my coaching staff. And maybe Brian Anderson should be considered. I'm just throwing that little.
Yeah, I'm staying out of that one.
I'm just throwing that little out there. I don't think Will Venable being hired says much about the roster and how, like, I don't think there's a large spending spree coming now because Will Venable's the next manager of the Chicago White Sox.
Yeah, I think that was predetermined. I mean, there's so much that goes into contract negotiations, right? From Will Venable's standpoint, it's like if you're Chris Getz, you have to convince Will Venable to leave Texas, which is a great setup, right? His friends are in the front office. He's with Boch. Boch was a part of that.
And Boch is only under contract through next season.
Exactly.
Which
right?
I thought, honestly, when he pulled his name out, that he might have been a manager in waiting there.
Yeah, no, but for sure, you got to entice that person to leave, right? Whether that's the money, the contractual, the years involved, right? Similar to a player, but yeah, I mean, he obviously felt it was the right deal for him and his family, and again, it's a no pressure situation in regards to how many games you're going to win next year. There's a lot longer leash, there's a lot longer runway to figure things out here than, let's say, in a New York or even in Atlanta, right? Atlanta's got that winning culture back from the early to mid 90s, so. You have a lot longer leash here where you can build it out the right way.
So we will wait for the official announcement, which could come as you are listening to this podcast, whenever you might be. I love the little tidbit that Will Venable's brother was Winston Venable, who played for the Chicago Bears. Okay. Played for was a special teams ace of the 2011 Chicago Bears. Hat tip to Chris Tannehill on that one, because I'd known that. I knew I had to look that up last night. I'm like, I feel like his brother played on the Bears. I didn't know like the special teams and exactly what year, but so a lot of things to come now for the White Sox after the World Series. And this is for any team not playing in the World Series, that as soon as the World Series goes final, basically the offseason begins. Sure. We have opt-ins, opt-outs. We have the GM meetings, the trade talks. Last year, we had the big bomb that Craig Counsell took the job, or Craig Counsell was hired by the Cubs and David Ross was out. I don't know if we'll see that type of bomb at the GM meetings. The big thing I think that's next for the White Sox is the trade of Garrett Crochet and or
that's
Luis
not even
Robert.
my big trade chip. I got
Who's your biggest trade? That's not your biggest trade chip?
No, I mean I think that there'd be a mass there would be a fire sale going on. The fans would not appreciate that. I don't know.
But you got to look. But hang on, though.
I agree. I agree.
This is ships in the night.
Totally.
There's 2 years left on a deal. Where are the White Sox going for the next 2 years?
Well, exactly. But the thing is,
and
you
their
never
bats.
know. Maybe I'm just under I'm just delusional, right? Maybe I'm sitting there going, somewhere in America at some point in Major League history, there's been a young team with a new coach that's won, right? And my big thing is that until they prove they can't win at the beginning of the season, you usually know in the first 20 to 30 games, right? But I'm gonna circle back with you. So I'm circle back, right? So my big thing is look at what they have. There's nothing against Luis Robert. I
It's
admire
okay.
him as a player. No, I admire him as
okay
a
if
player.
it's
Let's
against-
talk strictly baseball.
Okay.
Strictly baseball
Okay.
ability here.
All right.
Yeah, like when you don't run a ball out, you're dead to me. I can't handle that. But
How about when you play less than 100 games?
Yeah.
Every season of your career except one.
so that's where I go with that, right? Garrett
Okay.
Crochet is absolutely insane. He's top three best three pitchers in baseball, in my opinion. But you look at Luis Robert. In my opinion, he stays healthy and plays hard, plays 150 plus games. He has Mike Trout comp numbers, right? I think you go move him, you move that chip this offseason, you go get back end bullpen, long guy, bullpen guy, and one bat. You go get 3 impact players and replace him and do it ASAP. I know he had a down year. I know he wasn't his best self, but I think you move on from that guy.
I do too. But I think the only way to get that type of package in return that you just said is going to mean you're going to have to package him with another asset. And
hopefully not Crochet.
I think Crochet is gone. I do. And
might be right.
Would I love Garrett Crochet as a White Sox for the next 8 years? Yeah. Where do I sign that deal? 100%. But the way the game works with where the White Sox are, and you look at the contract and you look at, or it's 2 years, right? It's 2 years of arbitration before he's a free agent. And I don't think the two sides are all that interested in sitting down and negotiating a long-term deal when at the deadline, the White Sox had the rug pulled out from them.
Did you
They
see?
had the
did you
rug
see
pulled out
clip?
from them.
Did you see the recent post? I forget who posted it, but there was a recent post of like Sale, Rodon,
Oh, I saw
and
it.
someone
Most
else.
strikeouts with the slider this year.
And I'm
On the
going,
slider.
and I'm going.
Most strikeouts on the slider this year. Sale, Cease, and Rodon.
I'm looking at that.
I
and I'm
threw
going,
up. I
holy cow! And understandable when you're not winning, you can't contractually keep all 3 of those guys together at the same time, or keep even 2 of them together. If you're not going to win, it's either you're all in or all out, right?
I mean, this is really Dylan Cease all over again.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Garrett Crochet this offseason is. The difference between Cease and Crochet, Cease is back, like his resume had innings pitched, strikeouts for years. I think Garrett Crochet is going to continue to add on. I really do. I think he's going to continue to be one of those dominant guys. But you don't know. He never threw more than 4 innings in any start in the second half.
Yeah.
And if you're going to get a package that's going to change the way your cupboard looks offensively, because right now you have nothing coming really outside of Edgar Caro, and very few catchers are Salvi Perez at the plate, right?
Sure.
It's a demanding job. Colson Montgomery had a great Arizona Fall League. He had a terrible AAA season. So hopefully that's a great sign heading into the offseason. But besides that, you just don't have a lot there. And position players, look, they can't hit the ball out of the ballpark. It's one of the worst, maybe the worst offense we ever saw this year. That needs to change. Like, there not only needs to be studs in that cupboard, there needs to be depth behind those studs. And they don't have either right now. And I think the only way that can change is if they take their 2 biggest assets, their 2, not just one, because I do agree with Luis Robert, their 2 biggest assets, and try to change that narrative right now.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if this is a topic for another show, but just taking a small little dive into this, there's so many moving parts, right? And you look at like different decisions Chris Getz has to make, right? You got to make even more key decisions in the everyday lineup, like a Sheets and an Andrew Vaughn, right? Like Andrew Vaughn, to me, he's always going to be consistent. So if you want to look at him and say, okay, are we okay with 250, 25 and 75? And if I'm Getz, I'm going, that works, because that's tough to replace. People often look at like, man,
he's led the team in RBI the last 3 seasons.
Correct. And
people don't like,
yeah,
that's true.
I've never led
the team.
I've never led my team in RBIs
ever
at the major league level.
Okay.
No, 35 ribbies is not.
No.
Cut it,
but I'm saying ever at any point. Like, did you lead? I'm saying at any point, at any level.
Here's my one claim to fame. 2009, I got locked in with Greg Walker. Things were clicking. I was cruising. I was hitting like 350, 370 first like month of the season, right? I'm like, here we go, man. Like, this is what it looks like. Was I going to hit 350? No. 280, 300, play electric center field, turn this thing around, right? Get my career back on track. Take one swing off Eric Bedard, pull my rib out of place. I can't barely breathe. Come back, and I go like, oh, for my next 20. And I remember going to Harold Baines at first base. So I'm like, hey, man, like, I'm 0 for my last 20. He's like, shit, man. He goes, I did way worse than that. And I'm like, you're in the Hall of Fame, dude. Like, shut up. You know what I mean? So,
well, look, a lot to come. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot to come. But the first step, I think, is a very, very good one for the White Sox. It's a very strong hire. I'm talking about perception here. I'm talking about perception in the game, not just how I feel about it, how BA feels about it, but how it's being perceived throughout the major leagues today is that the White Sox got this right. I'm going to ask you on the spot to grade the hire. And like this could come back 2 years from now as an awful receipt. This could come back
it's not.
What's okay? So what's the hire?
So
grade the hire.
And I am a little biased because I know Will, but I guess when you have more insight, you can make a better prediction, right? So I think this is an A hire. I mean, anyone says A plus, you got to dial it down. Like who's an A plus hire? Maybe a Tony La Russa going to
Bruce Bochy to Texas, maybe.
Oh, yeah, correct. That's an A plus hire. Tony La Russa to going to the Cardinals, like that's an A plus hire.
Yes.
This is an A hire to me. He checks every box. Analytics side, smart. Got a chance to learn from 3 Hall of Famers. Chris Young was always there with him every single step of the way. Both Princeton guys. And let me leave you with this. Talk about Venable's brother playing in the NFL. I always pride myself. I was never a great baseball player. I was just a freak athlete, right? I could do everything. Will Venable is a freak. He's a fucking great athlete, man. It's unbelievable. He can run, jump, throw, and he's big.
Can he play outfield? Can he play right field right now?
No, listen, I still have hopes and dreams. Sneak in there a couple games.
BA in the flesh, dude.
Yeah, man.
This is great. This is great. The White Sox are hiring Will Venable, Ryan McGuffey, Brian Anderson, the White Sox Recap podcast. Putting a bow on this edition. Can't wait to see what's next with the White Sox and with the podcast.
It's coming up next year. I think it'd be a great opportunity to get some of those guys back. Some of my former teammates and myself, bring a different energy there. Hopefully when we show up, whether that be in, April, May, whenever that is, the White Sox have some momentum going and can get some fans in there. And let me tell you, the fans, they have every excuse in the book. They have every right to not show up. But this is a great opportunity. You can look, man, we stank. There's no pathway for us to be good this year. But you know what? Let's see what it looks like out of the gate. Show up, bring energy, and then that way you can sit back and talk to Chris or Jerry, whoever, and then you can have an axe to grind there. But that was the worst season we've all ever seen. It cannot get any worse than that.
Well, I don't think we'll ever see anything like it again. I mean, it took, 62 years to top it? So
never.
Certainly not in our lifetimes are we going to see something like that. It just sucks that it was the Chicago White Sox. You brought up something I want to get to. There's 2 more things I want to hit on, and one of them is something you just mentioned. Because as a guy who has spent time coaching, and I know how much you love it and how much you feel like it's part of your, that's who you are and part of who you want to be. One thing that has frustrated me about the White Sox, not take the manager out of it, the staffs. I think when you look up and down some of the staffs, and I'm not talking just about baseball, go look at the Detroit Lions coaching staff, right? Everyone thinks Dan Campbell. You look at their, I know not every sport's the same. But this is where I'm going here. Who coaches wide receivers for the Detroit Lions? Antoine Randall L. Who coaches defense? Aaron Glenn. Who coaches running back? Scotty Montgomery. Who coaches offensive line? Hank Fraley. I think I've looked at this a few times, by the way, because I'm just reciting this off the top of my head. All of these guys played those positions and now are coaching them in the NFL. You look at the White Sox. You look at that 2005, and I here's what sucked. We always have to go back to 05, but at least we had 05. You had Greg Walker, successful career in the big leagues as a hitter, and just at that position of first base. Harold Baines, obviously. Tim Raines, obviously. Joey Cora, obviously. Right? These guys were respected players at their spots. So when they're giving you instruction, boom, boom, boom. I've looked up and down. I thought one of, when the White Sox hired Robin Ventura, and I know, he fought back even wanting that job. I thought, man, can you get a Gene Lamont as your bench coach? A guy who's a former manager who could just sit there and be like, here you go, kid. And they got Mark Parent. And I was like, that's that's awful. And they had, Pedro Grifol had one. And I just don't think there was much interest in a guy who'd already done the job in Toronto. And I look at that staff, hitting coach. I think Ethan Katz is kind of he's earned the right to stay on staff. I think some people might fight that. He's done a lot with very little, especially bullpens.
And real quick, and to interject on that.
Yeah.
I don't know Katz well. I haven't established a relationship with him until we start communicating while some guys were rehabbing and everything. And let me tell you, the dedication from him, again, win, lose, or draw with that guy, he's putting in the work. And so I will go to bat for him and say, like,
Yes.
that guy knows his stuff and he's putting in the work, and his care factor is a 12 out of 10. So at least with that, you can rest your head at night, right? Don Cooper, right? Legend in the game.
Yeah.
He was so good that he had established a precedent, right? Had established an energy and was like master of his craft. But every one of our pitchers was a dog, right? Like he demanded, like, I don't care if you get shelled, dude, figure it out. Like Burley, man. Hey, Coop, I don't want to throw a bullpen today. Arm's killing me. Don't fucking throw a bullpen then. I don't care. Like it doesn't matter. But, you know, I just think right now it's so tough because you want to push these guys, but you have half the people saying, well, we can't push them because we don't want them to blow out. And the other guy's like, dude, let them hit the gas. Like you're paying them $30 million over however many years. Like throw them out there. If you blow out, you blow out. That's what you have That's what you have surgeons for, man.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm like, if people are here, like people are going to go like, who the hell's, they're going to go look at rosters in big leagues and be like, look at these coaching staffs. They had success, but I look at the Dodgers. Dave Roberts, you know, has probably the most famous stolen base in the history of baseball.
Ever.
Mark Pryor is their pitching coach. Josh Bard is their bullpen coach. Bob Guerin is their major league field coordinator. You know what I mean? Like Aaron Boone, right? Successful careers, it doesn't always translate. Great player, great man. I get it. But when you're bringing in guys where people are like Googling, okay, Pedro Grifol, and then you start Googling his staff, bad sign. That's my question, I guess, is how important, the manager's important, but how important are all of the other ancillary coaching roles? Because those are the guys that you as a player are actually working with day in and day out.
It's huge. I mean, I'm going to reference Greg Walker here, obviously, because we spent so much time in the cage together. But you look at a guy like Mike Gellinger, right? Yeah. Who didn't have the notoriety in the playing career, but perfect supplemental coach to Greg Walker in the cages with you, right? In the trenches with you, who will feed you baseballs and throw BP to you nonstop until you can't swing anymore, right? But, you know, to your point, Greg Walker, those guys are White Sox. Harold Baines is a White Sox. Tim Raines played for the Expos, but he's a White Sox, right? All those guys have so much blood, sweat, and tears poured into the organization. So there's an extreme value add to bringing back guys that have a history with the team. And you know, I'll talk about myself. You know, I struggled so much consistently at the plate, right? And I was just constantly searching. But man, having Greg Walker and Harold Baines at the top step to lean on saved my butt, right? Like I was constantly just sitting there going, just searching for answers, searching for like, what do I do? Where do I put my hands? How do I get on base? How do I compete? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of credibility to be said when you got a Hall of Famer sitting there, you know, giving you your card on where he thinks you should play defense and stuff. So I think, but again, it's going to start with piece number one, right? Yeah. You don't know who you can hire until you get the first piece in place. You hire Will Venable or you hire Skip Schumacher, Buck Showalter, or McCullough, right? Whoever that may be, then you set the coaching staff out from there.
Yeah, I'm not going to judge the hire until it's made, and unless it's Buck Showalter, I have a wait and see approach. You know, I got excited when Pedro Grifol at his press conference and told me and Chuck on the White Sox Talk podcast. He did an interview with us immediately afterwards and said, "We're going to prepare to kick your ass every day." And it was it was the complete 180 of what we had just heard from the La Russa staff that I was like, "Oh, let's go! This guy's going to kill it." And it didn't work out. So, less is more. Shut your mouth. Build a staff. Have some credibility that way, and let's see what you build. Last thing I have for you. You said that Venable would be in your top two. So who's that other one?
Well, again, I'm a selfish SOB, so I'm going to pick guys that I have a history with and I really respect and I love to death, like really love the way they go about their business. So two opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Not that this guy I'm about to mention is not smart, but you got Will Venable, Princeton background. He's the silent assassin, right? He's really quiet, but also will show emotion in a given situation. But you know, great baseball pedigree, smart, articulate, has the wherewithal and ability to make snap decisions. My other guy is Skip Schumacher for a couple reasons. He played, again, with my friend Chris Duncan. I've known Skip for 15, 20 years. The grit we were talking about, the accountability we were talking about, and the guy that will get you to run through a brick wall, that's that guy. So I don't know if he's the best fit for the White Sox against the other candidates, right? Only time will tell. But I mean, look at the comment he made against when they played the Dodgers and Shohei Ohtani, right? When Shohei had 15 home runs in that game or something. He's like, F that, man. I'm going to pitch to that guy. And that says a lot. That says a lot. Like, we're not pandering. We're not going to back down. We're not going to fold. The fans all come here. We're not going to pull LeBron and sit to rest. Like, we're going to come here and we're going to give the fans what they want. If the pitcher's not trying to give up a home run, if he takes them deep, he takes them deep. So, man, I like Skip because of the grit. And you mentioned earlier, he's the 2023 Manager of the Year. You don't go sugar to shit overnight. So
right.
he's got it in him, right? And it's just a matter of surrounding him and giving him some ammo. I think he would do a phenomenal job.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot here with 2 questions. I'll start with this first one. You'd be not surprised. Here, you'd be very surprised if the White Sox hired
George Lombard, only because I think he's got a good thing going with AJ Hinch. They're up and up with the young staff or young players, young roster. I think he's in a good spot. Joey Cora's over there. They got a good thing going.
You would not be surprised if the White Sox hired
Buck Showalter. I only say that because of the history.
A BA bomb at the end?
I get it. I got to hit you with it. I didn't want to mention it earlier. I didn't want you to fold. I didn't want you to melt down mid-episode, so I'm sorry. But, hey, Buck Showalter, these guys have done it. They need to get someone in there that's done it at a high level for a long time. If they decide to go that route, he has the experience. And if they're going experience, man, we're going to be having a lot more heated exchanges here. I'm going to have to pick you up so you don't get too excited.
No, my microphone's not off. I just stopped talking. You've got me. You got me. 37 minutes in, you drop a bomb.
Sorry, buddy.
And here we are. But wow. Well, I would be surprised. So I love it. We already have something to fight about. And what do you think, man? The first episode is in the books. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun. We're week to week, right? We're week to week.
Well, listen. If we get 14 views and I don't hear from you next week, then I'll just assume that I'll take the hint.
Take
Okay.
the draft and get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we might even have a breaking news podcast as soon as this week. So let's see when the White Sox hire George Lombard and Buck Showalter as their bench coach. You know, it'll be we'll sit there and say I told you so.
Yeah, you ain't kidding, man.
BA, love you, brother. Glad we're doing this. We'll look forward to the next one, and we'll keep on keeping on.
See you, dude.
This has been the White Sox Recap Podcast. Like, listen, download, subscribe. We're going to have plenty more fun along the way. Guests, surprise guests. BA's got quite the it's the old term, the old Rolodex of teammates, former coaches, execs. We're going to get a bunch of guys on. We're going to have more fun than anything else, and we look forward to the next one. For Brian Anderson, I'm Ryan McGuffey. We'll see you next time.